Greetings, people who like to learn new things. I'm not going to apologize for my videos anymore. You might think they're boring. You might think my train of thought's a little bit incoherent, but that's okay. I have really good ideas and I'm going to send them out there and see what happens. I think my grammar ideas are so damn good that they should be in grammar handbooks. Grammar handbooks. I really do. Maybe somebody will notice this and listen to me and want to include it in their work, okay? Now, in this series, I talked about the 9 distinction indicators. I went over that many times. I told you I don't call them relative pronouns. They're distinction indicators. I made that perfectly clear. And I left out one word. There's a word in the grammar handbooks that they use as a relative pronoun, and I did not include it. The word is whose. Is it really a relative pronoun? Is it a distinction indicator? Would it fit into my system? Sorry. Well, I left it out because it was extremely complicated. And I'm glad I did because this is a beautiful thing. I want to share this because no one else has ever said this. This will be the first time a human ever spoke these words. The word whose. Okay? Let's talk about direction of reference. Okay? Now, when you have a sentence with a distinction phrase or clause, which is in my other videos, I already taught that, okay? You have something that happens. For example, you have man who lives, book that is blue, all right? The one whom we trust. Now, you'd have full sentences. I'm just showing you the referent and the key words in the distinction phrase or clause, okay? Now, what you see here is an arrow. This is telling you that the direction of reference, in other words, it's going in a certain direction. It gives you a certain feel when you read the sentence. The reference here in these examples is anaphoric, okay? It refers backwards. You see, the distinction phrase or clause refers backwards. Now, you've seen that in my other videos. I don't need to go into detail, but the point is, it's anaphoric. It refers backwards to a referent which is called antecedent because it comes before. The referent comes before the phrase or clause. Okay, let me show you this again. Now, when we get to the word whose, you've seen the word whose in many sentences, and I'm sure you've used it many times in your life, okay? Now, when you see the word whose, let's say you see the man whose reputation, all right? I can't see correct. Neighbor whose children, and college whose professors. Okay, that's just part of sentences. But you see something, you see another arrow. Okay? What's happening is the direction of reference, the way the mind's going, is opposite of that in the anaphoric situation. You see, because it's referring forward to a postcedent referent. In other words, the referent comes after the distinction indicator. Okay, in other words, let's say you have man whose reputation was excellent, okay? Now, when you look at the predicate here, all right, in your phrase, what's it referring to? Reputation, was that excellent? Was the man excellent? You see that the direction of reference is not like it was in my previous videos, like what I showed you with distinction phrases and distinction clauses. That's very difficult to understand, but I'm going to go faster. This video will be 90 minutes long. So you see, there's a direction of reference. One is anaphoric, all right, refers backwards, and one is cataphoric, refers forward. So with the word whose, if it's used in a sentence, if it's an integral part, there's going to be a cataphoric feel of referring forward. And that's confusing. And that is why I did not include it in my original list and did not discuss it. Because if I did, it wouldn't have made any sense. Now I'm going to make sense of this and you're going to like it. This is great stuff. Now, here's sentences. I voted for the man who had an excellent reputation. That's a sample sentence with a distinction phrase which I taught in previous videos. Now, here's another sample sentence. I voted for the man whose reputation was excellent. Okay? Now, in the first sentence, okay, you have a given referent. We talked about that. A distinction indicator, who, and here's your distinction phrase. It's underlined. We already talked about that. You should already know this quite well. Now, here's the second sample sentence. It's a little different. I voted for the man whose reputation was excellent. Now, remember the direction of reference, that feeling that you have when you're reading. All right? So, is this the given referent, man? All right? Is this the distinction indicator, or you would call it relative pronoun? And is this here, okay, it's underlined, is that really a distinction clause or a relative clause, as you might call it? Well, let's see what happens here. And I'm reasonably sure that no one's ever said this, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only guy on the internet who teaches this. Okay? Let's break it down. What really happens in the mind when you're speaking like this and using the word whose? Okay, I've studied this for a long time. And here's what you get. Okay? What you're really saying is this. Look at this middle section here. I'm going to read it to you. You can pause that if you want to. What you're really saying is, just like with your distinction clauses and your other indicators that I already taught, you actually originally have two genuine clauses, okay? You would call them independent clauses, and you want to speak and you want to blend them together in one sentence. So what you're really saying is, I voted for the man, period. His reputation was excellent, period. Or you could say, I voted for the man, period. The man's reputation was excellent. Here are those two sentences that I just read. Now, you know from my previous videos and my teaching that you have a process in which you're going to be deleting in the mind the period and the word his. In the mind, punctuation is just as valuable as words. When we speak, we punctuate. See what I just said? When we speak, and I pause momentarily, and I said we punctuate. We never, ever speak without punctuation. In the second sentence, in our minds, we would delete the period and the two words the and the word man's, okay? There'd be a deletion here, and we would insert the word whose. This happens automatically in the mind. We don't even have to think about it, okay? So there was a deletion of punctuation and words, word or words, and then there was an insertion of the word whose. But this is why I did not include the word whose with the other 9. Because watch, we're talking about what? His reputation, the man's reputation. Well, his is a possessive adjective, and the word man's, through inflection, is changed into a possessive noun. We have a possessive case, a possessive situation, which we didn't have before, and we would not have it with those other words. So the reason why I've claimed for 30 years that most of these words that I talk about aren't really relative pronouns is because how can you replace a possessive adjective or a possessive noun, a noun acting as an adjective, how can you replace it with a pronoun? It doesn't make any sense. Logically, linguistically, it doesn't make any sense. So if I'm going to teach you what goes on in the mind, it damn well better make sense. Now, let's go back to a different sentence All right, here it is. This, you can see that there. I'll read it to you. This sentence right here. She returned her book, period. He could not return his book because his was stolen. Okay, again, she returned her book. He could not return his book because his was stolen. Now, here you have her book's a possessive adjective, her, okay? Over here, you have his is a possessive adjective. Only here do we encounter a pronoun, possessive pronoun, because this is basically a pro form. This is, what you're really saying is his book, but you're just simply using one word, his. So again, up here when we delete, we're deleting words and punctuation that imply possession. And that is the crux, and it has to be understood, and then it can be fixed, and then it can be explained. Okay? And that's what we're doing. Let's move forward. Try to keep up. This is a beautiful thing. The next sample sentence here. Pause for a minute. All right. I prefer neighbors whose children are courteous. I prefer neighbors whose children are courteous. I won't tell you about my neighbors here. You won't believe it. They're not courteous, and they probably never will be. Now, what you're really saying, remember the mind, the psyche, I prefer neighbors who have children who are courteous. That's what you're really saying. I prefer neighbors who have children who are courteous. So you see now an innate structure. You see a structure on a deep abstract level, and what you're really saying is you're using who have, and the word who, all right, is replacing the word whose. Okay, the whose is a pro form. It's replacing this. And you have who has and who had and who. It's a structure, it's a form, it's a mental structure that you use all the time and don't even realize it. No one's ever told you this, and probably no one ever will. Because you have a case, you have a mood, you have a thing that's implying possession, possessiveness. So you have to use the words have, has, and had. When you possess something, you have it, or he has it, or you had it. Possession, you have to have the word have, has, or had somewhere in your mind as you're speaking, or you can't impart the sense of possession. So here's another sentence here. There's another one. All right. I buy from companies whose policies embrace fair trade. Okay? One sentence. But what you're really saying is, I buy from companies that have policies that embrace fair trade. So once again, you have distinction indicators working together with the possessive words have, has, or had. In this case, again, I buy from companies that have, all right, that have policies that embrace fair trade. Once again, you have another structure. That have and that has and that had and that. This is actually what you have. People don't realize it, don't know, and don't care. This is wonderful. This should be in handbooks along with my distinction indicators, my noun clause indicator, and all that good stuff. I'm not going to apologize for being boring anymore, because I have a brain and I'm going to use it. And I'm going to use it as much as I can, because they say that to prevent from getting dementia and all that crap, you should learn new things. That's what they say, learn new things, learn new skills, blah, blah, blah. So that's what I'm doing here. And maybe you can learn to do this also. Now here's the beautiful thing. Look at this sentence. Look at this mess. This is so beautiful, and I'm really proud of this. I prefer neighbors who have children who are courteous. It started out with this top sentence. This is what you would say when you speak. I prefer neighbors whose children are courteous. You wouldn't speak 2 or 3 sentences and expect the listener, the audience, to piece them together. When you speak, you're doing that for them. I prefer neighbors who have children who are courteous. Well, what happened here? Did anybody notice? I figured these things out a long time ago, and I'm only now sharing them, and I should have done this 30 years ago. Look at the beautiful thing you get. Here is your referent one, neighbors. I prefer neighbors, and what do we have here? A distinction phrase. Who have children. Here's your referent number 2, children. I prefer neighbors. This distinction phrase, all right, makes a distinction about neighbors. Here you have referent number 2. And what do you have? Children who are courteous. You have distinction phrase number 2. And here's your referent number 2. This is what you're saying when you speak like this. This is actually what you're saying. And no one has ever told you that. No one. You go on the internet, you're not going to find this. So the beautiful thing is I saved the word whose for last because it doesn't really fit in perfectly with the other ones. It's in the family, but it's separate and totally unique. I just showed you how unique it is. You end up with a structure that has 2 distinction phrases and 2 reference. I am so pleased to be able to speak these words because someday somebody's going to pick it up and put it in the grammar books where it belongs. Because why? It's a double distinction indicator. It's a unique, wonderful thing. It's a word that people don't even know why the hell they're using it. So, in conclusion then, the distinction indicators, which I showed before, there's 5 base, okay, 4 augmented, 3 primary, 5 referent carriers, and 1 double distinction indicator. You could say, you'd be tempted to say that's a base indicator because it's a single word, but no. It does that beautiful thing I just showed you. It's totally cool. And, I just can't wait to do more grammar videos because I'm not apologizing anymore. When I used to box in the ring and fight people, I didn't apologize to the opponent because my skills were poor. I just beat the crap out of them. So there you have it. So I hope you learned something. This is great stuff. I'm making history here. Anyway, hey, thanks for being patient and see you soon. Good night.